Welcome back to my channel. My name is Derek Main and I review translated literature. And today what we have on tap is The Translator's Bride by Joao Reis. It is translated from the Portuguese by the author himself, and it is an open letter publisher, one of my favorite publishers. I think I've mentioned before, I have a subscription to them, and I also really enjoy Chad Post of Open Letters podcast. So I was excited about this one. As you can see, it's kind of a slim volume. I had no idea what to expect, as oddly I had not come across any reviews or really a lot of buzz about this title, which now that I've read, I'm pretty surprised about because it is hilarious. So I ended up reading this book on a plane ride for work back from Jackson, Mississippi to Raleigh, North Carolina. And, I'm trying to sit there, in between strangers and just sort of the seats are so small. I'm a bigger guy and I'm just trying to do this and not bother anybody and be real quiet. And I'm embarrassed to say I was cracking up. Literally, I was laughing enough to where someone, I'm sure they didn't, thankfully, but wanted to ask what is so funny? What is so funny is this book. It is hilarious. I'll go into, I guess, the plot. The plot's pretty simple. The translator's bride. So the translator is our narrator. His bride has left him. And if he can find a way to publish a book, if he can find a way to get publishers to pay him for past translations, then he can one day buy her this yellow house at the edge of town that she's always liked. And that will, of course, bring her back. At this point, Helena, the bride, is out to sea. That's sort of all we know. On a journey she has left. Well, so this narrator kind of just goes through meandering the streets. He lives in kind of like a boarding house. The time period is really unclear because there's horses and buggies and streetcars, but make of that what you will. The motorists, I think at one point they say, have just started coming. So he lives with this landlady who makes these awful sounding stews that just smell up the room. And there's these various weird characters that live in the boarding house with him. He is basically just disgusted with everything in himself and, of course, his circumstances and also the humanity, the sea of humanity that he walks through. And that's just what makes so many hilarious little asides and sections. When I went this morning to pick out some sections I wanted to read and highlight, I had dog-eared a lot of it. And I ended up not being able to highlight that much because first off, it's a really long sentences, but also it's just each one was kind of an example of the humor. And I'd rather you just read it. I don't want to read the whole book to you, So, I picked 3 that are kind of interesting, but honestly, there was just there was one that was 4 pages long that I just wanted to read in hilarity about how funny this is. And as funny as it is, there is absolutely a thematic quality as far as the role of the translator in the publishing world, small ones, but also the larger literati world, and kind of him peering through that, maybe wishing he was a part of it, at least wishing that he had the money that some of them have, and basically feeling, I think, forgotten, ignored, spat upon. That's sort of how this character is. And what's interesting about that is, as I said, it is translated from the Portuguese by the author. So the author is a translator himself as well as a novelist. And I found myself really thinking throughout, I'd love to read a version of this book translated by someone else. And that's odd, right? Because a lot of times when we hear that typical critique of, I don't like to read translated literature because it's not the actual thing, it's not the author's words. Well, I come from a whole nother spectrum because I love the idea of multiple artists getting together to sort of interpret a work. Once you put pen to paper and you put it out there into the world, it really is no longer yours. And certainly there are classics like Huck Finn and Great Gatsby and Sound and Fury that we all had to read in high school or perhaps college. And, those were translated to us. They were translated to us by the professors that taught them. They were translated to us by the critics that first read them and put out their reviews. They were translated to us through the culture that the books came into. And then, since it's been many years since those books came, they were translated through the way the culture changed. Well, in this book, it is not translated. I mean, it's translated as in he took the words in Portuguese and then he made them into the English words. And I'm sure there was some flourish there. I want to give him full credit, as a translator to believe that, he's including some art in that. But I really, really appreciate the art of the translation. And I would love to see this book. Again, it's not a critique that he did it himself. That's great. It's amazingly technically accomplished. But I felt like a little bit of art missing to where I wanted to see, and maybe part of it, right, is the narrator. Like, he has such a strong voice and a strong take on the world that I wondered how that would be seen through the lens of another artist. So that's just kind of a quick aside. Let me go through 3 little sections of it. Then I'm going to finish off with not a spoiler, but something that I felt does nothing to ruin the book at all if you are interested in reading it, but something that I kind of came to about halfway through that I think is maybe just my own perspective of it, but maybe there's something there. We'd have to ask the author and translator. And then I'm going to finish up today actually with some thoughts on booktube in general. I don't think I'm going to put it in the title because I don't want to draw a ton of attention to it, because I don't want to be too negative, but I have some thoughts on that. But let's get into the real reason we're here today, The Translator's Bride. So page 43 is a great example of what the translator thinks of the publisher. And again, he's having trouble getting paid for his work. Once he is promised some payment for his work, he's then told that he's got to translate these 2 behemoth novels, part of a series, within 2 months. And then that's kind of yanked and, it's like a carrot in front of him. Like, you can do this, but it's an impossible task. So this is what he thinks of the publishing world. I'm such an ass. I never knew which way the wind was blowing. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to follow it. All my life fighting against the current. Nonetheless, they were the ones who have triumphed. I'm the amateur. These stupid dandies gather at parties, stuff their mouths with hors d'oeuvres as if they hadn't eaten in ages. Miserable scoundrels, the public applauds. They couldn't care less if the publisher is in debt with the translator, the typographer, the cleaning lady. It's none of their business. Pigs triumph. I love how that ends. Pigs triumph. A really bold and hilarious take on where he sees himself as a translator in this sort of larger literary world. And that's actually why I chose to talk a little bit about booktube during this section or during this book rather, because of that section right there alone. That's kind of got my wheels spinning a little bit. Pigs triumph. All right, page 81. So I talked about the translator bride, Helena. And I thought this was a really sweet, the book is not lyrical. It's much sort of harsher and funny and comedic. It's not sort of a lyrical masterpiece. Not that the author, couldn't do that. Maybe he can, maybe he will, but that's just not the style of the book, right? But there is this one little section here that I thought was quite beautiful. If possible, I would merge with Helena, would be her skin, spleen, a kidney, would be always with her, and would neither commit mistakes nor make decisions. And I love that idea of merging with the one he loves. That gets to a lot of his self-disgust and self-hatred. That part there about not committing mistakes nor making decisions, that kind of comes up a lot. He wants to not do that in his life, but I also think maybe as a translator too. He wants to not make the decisions because he's afraid of making the mistakes. So there's a little bit of push and pull between the technician and artistic nature. I think that's it, of being a translator. But regardless, I think throughout his life, he's just that type of person. It kind of reminded me of, I don't know, like a Dostoevsky character or somebody, one of those just like sort of hunched over miserable sad sacks that are, very, very smart and can see through all the world, but are not able to really do anything to it, to affect it because of their anxieties or mental illness or just their overall like stasis. But merging with her, that's what he would like to do. It's not enough to love her. It's not enough to have her even in a way with a yellow house. He wants to merge with her. And the last one I'll do gives a good sense of his self-disgust on page 95. And this I also think is hopefully give some sort of idea of how funny the writing is here. And I wrote down page 95, yet just went to it and nothing is highlighted. So let's see. 93. See, I can't read my own handwriting, which is, well, it's a problem. All right. I have to decide where in this sea of commas where to start. A man stares at me from the other end of the vehicle, seems hypnotized. I wonder what he is thinking about me. Well, that's neither there nor here. Maybe we're just nothing in this world. I don't know if I dream or exist. The dunghill's in flames, and a sea of mud and filth will swallow all of us. Life is an abomination. Don't know why I cling to it. The only explanation is Helena. And so there you go. Life is an abomination. The dunghills are a sea of flame and filth and disgust. It doesn't even know why he clings to it. The only explanation is Helena. Which brings me to a little bit of my, again, it's not a spoiler, it's just my thought on, I don't think Helena is a person. I do not think Helena is a woman. There are not enough descriptions of Helena for her to be a real breathing bride. I think that this book is seeped in symbolism. I won't get at what I think Helena represents because I do think you should read it. And I think that that is a little bit of a spoiler. Me just saying I don't think Helena is a person, frankly, it's not a spoiler because that's just my perspective and sense that I got reading through it and feeling that this was very much an internal dialogue, and that everything in it was more representative of his feelings and way he goes about navigating the world as opposed to some sort of reality-based thing. So that's that. That's The Translator's Bride. I was surprised how much I liked it. It really was. And I say surprised only because usually I've got some sense through reviews and buzz, but I didn't see a lot on this. And as we're ending the end of the year, you're seeing all these year-end lists. And it's these books that I want to see on year-end lists. I think we know about Vernon Subutex, and I think we know about Krasna Hakori, books that I've reviewed. But I want to see some lesser known stuff. I want to be able to find those nuggets, those little gems, those unheard of or unheralded books. And that's going to bring me into a little bit of talk about booktube. So some background for me, here's how I came into this. I am not a big internet savvy or computer or social media person. I left all of social media except to post pictures of my kids on Instagram a while back when the politics stuff here in America was just getting, too much for me to read. It was hurting my mental health. And when I went back, it was like I knew there was this little slice that I loved at Twitter, and it was book Twitter. And I really appreciated some, in particular, accounts, people that spoke about their reading life, what they were reading, what they were interested in. And so I decided to come back and engage solely in that. And as I was doing that, there was actually an Australian that I follow. His name's Damien, I think how you pronounce it. And he had just had a young child and was posting a lot of pictures of his reading life being interrupted by her. And as a guy with 2 kids, I really related to it, liked it. But a while back, he had posted, I don't know if this was a year ago or so, he had posted a video review of The Literary Conference by Caesar Aria. And I really, really liked that book. And I was so excited that someone talked about it for a little bit. And I just thought, this niche and audience is pretty small, but I'd like to do the same thing. Like, I'd like to be that person where, maybe somebody stumbles on it and they see something that they didn't think was ever going to be talked about. So that was sort of the impetus for starting the channel. But I have to say that I did not have a sense of booktube before then. I really didn't. I mean, I didn't go to YouTube for many things, and so as I started, another sort of entry point I had was I used to, if I read a book I really liked, Apple, through their podcasts, I like podcasts, listen to them a lot, they have a search function where I would search for something. So if I read 2666, for instance, and really liked it, I would see if anybody had a podcast talking about it. And that's how I found the Translated Lit podcast, Lost in Translations, done by Knowledge Lost, who also has a channel on here. And I love his podcast. I love his channel, his Twitter. I'm like a big fan and of the work he does, along with sort of a group, his team. He's got a group of people that like he works really, really hard to highlight this stuff. So I knew that I was interested in that, and that was like another entry point, and someone else was kind of doing this stuff. So there was some level of interest there. But I didn't know about BookTube on the whole. And one weird thing started happening as I started posting videos, which is my algorithm completely changed. It used to be everything to do with Carolina basketball, because I have a sickness when it comes to North Carolina Tar Heel basketball. That would just be my algorithm, and I would ignore it all, right? Now I'm getting a bunch of BookTube in my algorithm. And I'm seeing these apparently very popular booktubers with 1,000 views, and I'm looking through their year-end. I'm watching their year-end lists, and I go back and I watch their reaction videos to the Booker Prize and the long list, and trying to get a sense of, all right, who else is out there? This is something really cool to discover and explore. And man, I'm disappointed. I mean, maybe it's just the algorithm or what becomes popular and stuff, but it's really the same books. I mean, and these are the same books that when I walk into my local bookstore, I mean, they're right there on the front shelf. If you read the New York Times or the New Yorker, or their Guardian, they're the ones that we all know are there and have talked about, and they're all English. And, I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with popular books. I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with English language books, but there's a whole world out there, and you can kind of know that if something has been translated, that speaks automatically to sort of its quality and heft. Like, of all of the countless books in all these countries, these are the ones we choose to bring out there. Like, this is where I think you're going to find the true literary stars, but also the weirdness. It's not just about the cultural aspect, which is really important to me, but let's get some weird writing. I mean, so much these days of American fiction is direct knockoffs of the postmodern movement, whether it's Pynchon and David Foster Wallace. That's, some of it's good. I mean, frankly, right now I'm reading a translated literature, the Rodrigo Frazat series, which is certainly owes some to that, and that stuff's good. So I'm not like knocking it. I mean, I love Infinite Jest, right? I'm one of those bro-lit guys, I guess, that still clings to thinking that's a great book. I love Pynchon, so I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but when that is sort of like still happening in 2019, and then there is the other side of things, which are these family generational stories that, touch on what it is to be, alive in America today. And I don't know, they just don't really do much for me. I mean, and that's fine, right? Like, books are for different people, and I'm so happy that anyone's reading that. I'm not complaining about the books. But I am going to complain about the fact that it's the same books that the most popular booktubers are talking about. And I never got involved, right, in the Goodreads community. Ever. I remember one time, maybe 6 years ago or so, I was looking to try to find something like Via Matas, because I had just read his first one, and I was like, oh, let me go through, and I tried to like pick out some reviewers and then look at their books, and I think I found The Private Life of Trees by Zambria on there, which actually was an open letter title. I mean, I found like one, maybe two to look at, but it just wasn't how I did recommendations or anything. But it seems that BookTube maybe came out of the Goodreads community. It feels a little bit like that. And so the cliquishness, like, that doesn't bother me, because I think that's just the nature of humans and how we are. But like the tags and stuff, it's all kind of like the same answers, right? And there just doesn't seem to be anyone trying to push the limits of this thing, or really, the beauty of this self-publishing and creating this content is that we can highlight things that are not highlighted on the New York Times. They're not in the New Yorker. They are not as soon as you walk into your independent bookstore. And it's great that it's great that those things exist, and they should exist. But I feel like our job, or a job that could be done by reviewers and folks on this medium, is to highlight the weird. Let's look at what's going to be talked about 25 years from now, not what's going to be talked at the moment. And I know this is a weird complaint from somebody that has just, 10 videos or something like that, just started. But I just noticed it because it's kind of showing up on my algorithm. I was hoping to kind of find some new voices and stuff. And some of these people, they make great videos. They're very good at what they do. But I'm disappointed in what they talk about. You know, I was watching one that, again, 1,000+ reviews that was going over the Booker Prize. And they, you know, just you could see there was just no interest in translated literature. And not even interest, but no even kind of understanding of what it was or what its place was. It was kind of this other thing. And I wish it wasn't that way. And I don't necessarily know why that exists. I mean, I don't know. And it's not something that, you know, we can fix easily or whatever. I mean, the popular books are going to be the popular books. But we don't need, in this format, to lift those up anymore necessarily, right? You know, I want to find something a little weird. So if anybody has suggestions for channels, you know, drop them down there in the comments. I'd love to see it. I know it's out there, right? Because the internet's huge. I'm just terrible at using it. And that is, you know, most of this rant can probably just be thrown right back at me and say, listen, you're only looking at the YouTube algorithm stuff that they show you. And of course, that's going to be the popular stuff. And what you need to do is dig a little deeper. And frankly, I would just rather spend my time reading than personally digging a little deeper. But you know, if you follow me on Twitter or you're watching this video and you know of some great channels or places to find weird stuff, like I would love to see it. I really would, because that to me is the fun of this, is discovery. And unfortunately, when I look through the popular booktube channels, I don't see a lot of discovery. Maybe if someone is a non-reader or someone who gets, you know, 3 books at Christmas and that's what they read the whole year, maybe then, yes, maybe they can decide, oh, Ben Lerner, I'll pick that one up or whatever, the Topeka School. But for those of us that are reading 50 plus to 100 to whatever books a year and really want to have a huge variety and stuff like that, you know, it's just, it doesn't really hit for us. And so anyway, that's my thoughts. I recorded that twice because the first time I think was a little too rough and whatever. I think this, hopefully without disparaging the books and without disparaging the content creators, explains kind of my issue with it. I'm really excited actually to see if I'm just missing something. Because most of the time when I have complaints about the world, I'm just missing something. So that's our review today. I recommend The Translator's Bride. It really, it didn't get a fair shake, I feel like. And it's something that if you didn't get a chance to read this year, try to, you know, get it in. Read it next year or 2 years from now as well. Like, everything doesn't have to be from 2019. The next book that I'm going to review, I just finished. It is Charco Press. They just came to the United States. I actually got this one before they came. I made my independent library find some British distributor that would send it. This is An Orphan World by Giuseppe Caputo, translated by Juana Adcock and Sophie Hughes. And I'm not going to say anything about it because because I want to save it for my review. Thank you guys so much for listening. Like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of stuff. All my info is like down there. And be good to folks.